So let me unpack the title for you first. Come Hell and High Water, Navigating the Kali Yuga with Love. So first let's just deal with the and, because normally the phrase is come hell or high water. My sense is, even after reading The Beautiful Thing by Wendell Berry, my sense is we're screwed. I used to be a big fan of 350.org, remember? His name just went out of my head. The guy who created that, the environmentalist. Anyone remember? No, you can Google it. But 350.org, the idea was, if we have to make sure we never go past 350 units of carbon in the atmosphere, otherwise we are doomed. We're in the 400s somewhere. So their organization still exists, but they're just depressed, I guess. I don't know, because they totally failed. I think we've crossed the point of no return environmentally. I think that democracy is in danger. I think that the whole country's in danger. The world is in danger. And I think I watch too much MSNBC, which is why I think all this. I've tried Fox, and then I think the CIA is after me, and it's all the conspiracy theories. So I shouldn't watch television, but I do. So anyway, I'm depressed, and even watching the still waters, all I'm watching is as they rise higher and higher, and take all my friends in Miami and turn them into dwellers in Atlantis. Yes. So this talk is about, we're going into very difficult times. And we have there's multiple ways of dealing with it. There's the way we probably will deal with it, and I'll come to that in a sec, which is horrifying. But there's an alternative way, which is the way I really want to explore. So we'll get to that. Then there's the notion of the Kali Yuga. So are you familiar with the goddess Kali? And the notion of Yuga. So in Hinduism, there are 4 Yugas. Basically, we would say Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and ours. And then this is the Kali Yuga. This is not a good time. But it's natural to the cycle of the universe that you have to go into these moments, in Christianity, on an individual level, you might call the dark night of the soul. But this is the dark night of civilization, human civilization. And the idea is that you get through it, however you get through it, and then there's a golden age. In the standard Hindu way of looking at the world, it's simply cyclic. It just goes around and around. I am more optimistic than that. I think the Kali Yuga is real. We go into this dark time, and for us it's going to be a dark time environmentally, politically, and otherwise. But it's not simply a flat circle, it's a spiral. So I think, with absolutely no evidence to back it up, but with no capacity not to think this, otherwise I'm just too depressed, I think it's a spiral. That, yes, we go around in these cycles, Golden Age down to the Kali Yuga, the very dark age. But when we come out, we don't just come out where we were, we come out a little higher. So the spiral is spiraling upward, and a little broader. So by broader, I mean, I'm drawing from, I think it's Steven Pinker's notion of the circles of compassion, that as we progress upward, the expression is a broader and broader circles of compassion. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. So in the Bible, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19:18, it says, oh yeah, I forgot I was talking to Unitarians. You haven't picked up a Bible in a while. No, all right, so 19:18, love your neighbor as yourself. And the assumption, I think, back then was they were talking about your actual neighbor. So your fellow Jews in the tribes, right? That's who they were talking to. Later on, it gets expanded. Even in the biblical times, you have love your neighbor, then you also have love your stranger. And it actually says love the stranger as yourself far more often than love your neighbor. It only says love your neighbor once. But it repeats caring for the stranger over and over again. So it wasn't simply people in the in-group. But when you go from the Bible, by the time you get to Jesus, for example, Jesus tries to expand the whole notion of neighbor. So neighbor is also like the Good Samaritan story. And the Samaritans were people that the Jews hated because they were competing, rival claims for who was the chosen people kind of thing. Then you get to Paul shortly after, and Paul has this amazing teaching where he says there is no Jew or Greek, male or female, slave or free in Christ Jesus. In other words, when you join the Christian community, the three major divisions in society end. And the divisions were you're either, for Paul, you're either Jewish or not, you're either a man or a woman, or you're a slave or a free person. But if you join this emerging community, there's no divisions at all. We're all equal in the early Christian church. Whether that was true or not is another story. Certainly by the time you get to organized Christianity, that's ridiculous. I mean, we don't even look at that. Now it's either you're this kind of Christian or you're not. They still hold up the man and the woman thing, and slave and free. In some, I mean, obviously the history of Christianity was not adverse to having slaves. So the idea, though, is that over time these things do expand. Slavery today, even though there's lots of slavery in the world, we don't value it. So, and now we're moving beyond even people to animals. On my radio show, I was talking a few months ago to Matthew Ricard, who is a famous Buddhist teacher from France, Tibetan Buddhist teacher from France, and his latest book is on kindness toward animals, based on the Tibetan practice of rescuing them. And like in Tennessee, we have that whole elephant sanctuary going on, just not too far from here. I've never been there, but I support them financially. You know what I'm talking about?
Hollenwald.
Yeah, Hollenwald. So he's arguing that this is part of his tradition, an ancient part of his tradition, and that we have to have we have to have absolute compassion for animals and not just people. So on the radio show, I mean, I don't argue with that. That makes total sense to me, except when it comes to bugs. and I asked him about gnats and little mosquitoes and those things that I go, and I kill it. I don't even think about it. And I said, well, do they care? You know, the little guys that manage to get into my bathroom through the windowsill, do they care if I kill them? Do they have they don't have a sense of self, I don't think. And he said, no, they have no self-consciousness, but they are conscious beings. And they have a sense of suffering when you cause them to suffer, and you cause them to suffer when you're chasing them around the windowsill, trying to stamp them out, and certainly when you actually stamp them out. And just listening to him explain that they have this sense of sentience, of just a consciousness of some sort, and a sense of being of some sort, that non-being causes them needless suffering, I no longer stamp them out. Mosquitoes, my excuse is they could have Zika or something, and so I kill them. But I'm on the path of expanding my circle of compassion, maybe even to mosquitoes. So in that sense, I'm optimistic in the long term. But in the short term, we have to go through the Kali Yuga. You cannot avoid it, and you cannot escape it, though there are many who are trying to help us escape. And I'm going to talk about some of that right now. I went to, it was called the 16th Annual Conscious Life Expo. 16th Annual Conscious Life Expo. It's held in Los Angeles, California. And it is a humongous event with thousands and thousands of people coming to it, hundreds and hundreds of vendors, and dozens of speakers, all about raising consciousness. But what was interesting about the Conscious Life Expo is the dominance of a kind of science, pseudoscience. They had, there were two ultimate concerns, almost like two camps. There was the scientific camp that was interested in creating devices that would heal you. And there was a scientific camp that was exploring alien life, not on other planets, but here in the United States. And they all were backed by science. There was nothing that wasn't rooted in science, which is interesting. It's like we are in a scientific age, but not scientific age as those of you who are actually card-carrying scientists might define science. I mean, one of the ways of discussing the scientific method is it's rooted in testing and validation, or you can't make a claim that cannot be invalidated, right? If it's Jesus was resurrected, I can't prove or not prove that, so it's outside the realm of science. But the science at the 16th Annual Conscious Life Expo was of a different kind. And let me go into that a little bit. So they had, there were dozens and vendors, because hundreds of vendors, not dozens, hundreds, almost 900 vendors. Everyone's selling something. And it was always something scientific, almost always. One of the two, there were two major things that were being sold. One was, I guess you call them crystal wands, like magic wands, but they had crystals embedded in them. Sometimes all the way through, sometimes just on the ends. And the idea of the wand, now some of you may be into this stuff, and you may know something I don't know, but I doubt it. So anyway, so I love talking to vendors. So I'm going to these people and say, okay, what's the deal? So they have these wands, and the wands are, in one way or another, attuned to the frequency of the universe. And so when you hold the wand, you are integrated into the universal flow of energy. The wand will do this to you. So one wand, the crystals themselves are already attuned. They just come out of the ground attuned, and then they're embedded in the wand. And the wand is glass usually. But there was another one which was way more expensive, which made it better, I guess. And that one was just a beautiful piece of glass, like a prism, with different, like octagonal shape. And it was really very nicely done. Felt good in your hand to hold. It had some weight to it. And on the end, there were gold flecks. So I asked, so how does it work? What are the gold flecks? So our wand, they told me, our wand is the best wand in the show because we insert these crystalline pieces into the ends of the wand. Then we put the wand in an MRI. So it's not gold, because I think MRI would pull the gold out. So you put it in an MRI, and the MRI machine activates the crystal in such a way that it aligns with the universe. Now, I don't think that's how MRIs work. I'm not sure. I'm not a technician or scientist, but I don't think that's how it works. But that's how they were selling it.
It's NMR at that level.
Yeah, right.
NMR.
It's just not going to do what these people are claiming it does. But when you say, okay, why is your wand better than their wand? Well, because we do it with this MRI device, and theirs is just plucked on by people, just sticking it in there. But the idea is that both of them are nuts. Neither of them do what they claim to do. But they had this, and they had booklets, and not pamphlets, on the science of it. It just wasn't what I would consider real science. They had, then the second thing they were selling was different kinds of water that had been treated in a certain way that makes it really water that will heal everything that is troubling you. So last Thursday on my radio show, I interviewed this woman from the University of Florence in Italy. And she holds 2 PhDs, one in nutrition, one in brain neuroscience. And her new book is called Brain Food. And the idea is that, she told me, that the research shows that we begin the process, our brains begin the process of devolution in our 20s. And that we get plaque on our brains, and this can lead to dementia. And it's just a natural process, but there are things you can do to slow it down. And she talks about all the foods we should be eating. I mean, I'm 67 years old. It's too late for me. I'm just going to keep going with the Big Macs, because I'm looking forward to dementia when I don't remember I ate the Big Mac, and I'll just... But she said the main thing you have to do is drink water. So now this woman has science, real science. She's a scientist, right? So she said, you gotta drink water. But she said, not just any water. So I'm thinking, oh, is she gonna tell me about the water that they're selling at the Conscious Life Expo? She said, no, tap water is good. Don't get water that's had all the minerals stripped out of it. Don't drink Coke, don't drink seltzer water, don't drink any of that junk. She said, tap water or other waters that are filtered out of the things that are unhealthy, toxins and stuff, but leave in the minerals and all that. And she says, you have to drink water because your brain, and I didn't know this, your brain actually dehydrates and shrinks. So you have to keep it well watered. Okay, so there is some science to this thing of water, but at the Conscious Life Expo, they were selling magic waters. Waters, they didn't say the water went through an MRI and now but magic water. And it's all treated and it can do all kinds of things. So I went to all the water places because they were handing out free samples of water. I thought, well, maybe it'll help me live through the weekend of the Conscious Life Expo. And there was this one guy who really pushed the science of his water. His claims were very simple. He developed the water to cure his father's colon cancer, and he also cured his own, the guy who's selling the water, liver cancer. It'll cure all kinds of things. So how do I know? I said, how do you, she says, well, here's the evidence. So this is actual reproduction. I mean, I did this, it's clear. This is a reproduction of the chart that he had to prove his point. This is the chart. All right?
Looks right to me.
It looks right to me too, right? You don't know what anything stands for. The only thing you can say is, it goes up. Right? It goes up. Now you're right because you're looking at mine. It goes up. So I said, okay, so what does the chart show me? He says, well, you'll start here, but when you drink the water, you're going to end up here. What ends up? No idea. No idea. So I said, well, because he was actually, literally, next to a booth that was selling a different water that's claiming to do the same thing. I said, well, how do I know which water to buy? He says, well, check the chart. So he says, the other guy's water only takes you to here. My water goes here. Here is better than here. That's high is better than low. His water is lower. Mine is higher. Buy my water. It made sense to him and all the people that were spending money on his water. I couldn't figure out why anyone would buy the other water that only got you, down here. I mean, that makes no sense. That's pseudoscience.
Yeah.
All right, but they couldn't get away without having science. That's my point. It's like science wins, but not real science.
No.
Another big interest they had at the expo that was going to get us through the Kali Yuga. We no longer rely on God, right? Even though I wrote a great book on God, and Casey is giving away free copies, so yeah, don't let him charge you for them. I gave them to him for free. So if he's charging you, he's just looking for a donation for the church. But they got away with they don't have a belief in a supernatural God, but aliens are something else. Because aliens are not supernatural. Aliens are just from another galaxy or something. So a lot of alien people, no, not alien people, I mean people who believe in aliens were there. I won't go through everyone because they're just, I'm not simply making fun, I'm hopefully just having fun with it to make a point. Of course, you may not know what the point is, it doesn't matter because this is funny stuff, but I mean the point is that we can't get away from science, but we don't have real science. So there was this wonderful woman, I won't give you her name, but a wonderful woman who, her pitch was that from before she was born, she was in contact with 3 Greys. You know the Greys? Those are the aliens with the big sort of heart-shaped heads, the wide appearing, very narrow chins, and the big eyes, gray skin. So 3 of them were in contact with her from before she was born, and they're always with her, and they're her guides. And she's now in the process of writing a 5-book series sharing the wisdom of her guides. And the first one was out, and that's what she was selling at her booth. And I went and talked to her because she seemed very rational, and she was a really delightful person to talk to. And totally convinced of her experience. It wasn't that she made this up. She wasn't faking it. I'm sure that she wasn't making this up. I'm sure she was deluded, but she wasn't scamming me. I mean, to me, I would say she's in contact with something in her collective unconscious, or come up with some psycho-spiritual thing maybe. But I don't think it was actual aliens. But that's beside the point. She believed they were aliens. And she was selling her book, and she had T-shirts. And the T-shirts had drawings, accurate, almost, I'll tell you what the almost was, almost perfect renditions of her 3 alien companions. And the only thing that was wrong, where she told me that she made a point of pointing this out to me, the aliens have these big eyes. They don't seem to have lids or brows, just these big eyes. But on the T-shirt rendition of her 3 alien friends, they had pink eyeshadow. And she said they do not wear eyeshadow. And I thought that was good to know. Because I didn't want vain aliens, just au naturel aliens. So I'm talking to her, she's showing me the picture, she's telling me her story. And I said, look, I don't want to sound whatever the equivalent of racist would be when we're talking about aliens. I don't want to sound anti-alien. But I'm looking at your friends here, and honestly, I can't tell them apart. They all look the same to me. It's like people say, oh, these people, they all look the same to me. These aliens all look the same. I said, how do you tell them apart? And she goes, oh, I have the same problem. They've been with me my whole life. I can always get them mixed up. I'm good with names, but not with alien faces. So, she was not the only one who was in contact with aliens. I met somebody else who's been in multiple dimensions much of his life. And I said, well, did you ever meet her 3 alien friends? And he said, yes, but they're just low-level bureaucrats in the galaxy. I know higher-ups. And people are just hungry for this, because these aliens are going to give us a way out. Two other examples about this. So one, you might wonder why I was there. So I only go where I'm hired to go. Otherwise, I stay home. But I was there to give 2 presentations. One, I was on a panel. I'll tell you about that in a second. And the other was, I was giving a talk on comparative mysticism. And I asked the guy who ran the thing, who started it 16 years ago, I said, why did you invite me? I don't fit in anywhere. And he said, my original plan was to do a separate track on religion with historians and scholars and stuff. But after I invited you, I forgot about it. And so here you are, just do your thing. So no one was there for my thing. When I have my slot comes up on, I guess it's Saturday afternoon, and I have 2 hours, and I have a room, maybe a little bit bigger than this, but like this size, and there are 40 people in it. Across the hall, in this direction, there is a 1,000-seat auditorium, and people lined up to get in both directions, going throughout the entire convention hall of the hotel. It's a huge place. This person was going to fill a 1,000-seat auditorium easily. So before I started, I wanted to find out what were they doing over there. So I went over to that department, to that side of the hall, and I asked, what are you in line for? The guy said, the 3-finger aliens. I said, wow, what is that? I had never heard of it. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. But in Peru, it's always a they. They are scientists, they are archaeologists, they are something. No names, no university. So once I was told that they are oftentimes at the University of Tennessee, but I don't know. I've heard that more than once. But that's not a joke. I mean, whoever they are, have said that. But anyway, they found mummies in Peru Yes, so see, Pat knows about this. And they did a X-ray of the mummies, and the mummies have only 3 fingers, and they're very long fingers. So I said, geez, does that prove alien life on Earth? And the guy said, well, proof, I mean, that's, this is a little bit of evidence, we have to, be more careful about this, but yes, they are good. And I said, well, how do we know that it's aliens? I can think of 2 other groups that would fit that category. Could be Girl Scouts. Maybe they were in Peru selling cookies and something happened. Or the Simpsons. The Simpsons all have 3 fingers. That's all they have. Don't. And the guy did not think either was funny. So no one had a sense of humor there except me. And that's because I was laughing at them. So that's probably why they didn't think it was funny. But they were looking for evidence. They needed evidence. And they found it because somebody had it. Another example was this panel I was on. So the panel was a lot of science people. One of them, the moderator of the panel. Anyone ever listen to the show Coast to Coast at night? So George, right? He was the convener of the panel, and he had all these scientists on the panel, and I was on the panel because they didn't know what to do with me. They said, "I'll stick them on a panel." And one of the guys on the panel is in his 70s, and he told his story. This is a brief version of his story. The story was that when he was 17 years old, he invented an engine that would power a rocket ship to go faster than the speed of light and get us to any part of the galaxy in just moments. I haven't heard of that. No one seems to have marketed it yet, but 60 years ago he came up with this. When he graduated high school, he got his diploma, and he's walking off the stage. He was like hooded, not by the graduation people, but hooded over his head so he didn't know where he was, whisked away by the CIA and taken to Roswell into the Area 51, where he was shown the alien rocket ship that was there, and this huge engine that powered the rocket ship, which no one had been able to get to work since it was found in the 40s. And they said, "You're the only one who can fix this." So he went over and he kicked it, boom, it comes to life. It was like that. So he fixed that. And then he spent the rest of his life in the CIA and all kinds of different things. So who knows if it's true, but everyone seemed to believe it. And then at the end of his presentation, they asked him, so what's the future going to be? And he says, the future's going to be fantastic. Forget the Kali Yuga. We're going to get out of it. As soon as I die, he said, I have to die. And when I die, I've instructed my lawyers to reveal to the world my latest invention, which is a small little box that everyone can have, that it's like a replicator in Star Trek. Anything you need, anything you want, bam, you can have it. And everyone will get this, and it will change the entire life on this planet. So then someone said, why do we have to wait till you die? And he said, if I revealed it now, I'd be really famous, and I'd have all the paparazzi, and I don't really like that, so I'm just going to wait until I die, and then I'll save the planet. And I'm thinking, what a selfish bastard. How many millions, if not billions, of people are going to suffer because he doesn't want to have his picture taken?
Yeah.
But he was a scientist, so he claimed, and people were eating it up. But the science was of the same quality as this chart. Completely meaningless. That is not going to save us from the Kali Yuga. All right, the second part of this is navigating the Kali Yuga with love. So this kind of science isn't going to work. I don't know if there's any science that's going to save us from the madness that's coming. If you look at how we treat refugees from Syria, for example, as they try to get into Europe or elsewhere, or this country, they are the other. And we have lots of others that we fear and despise, but these refugees from war are certainly among them. But when we start getting climate refugees, it could overwhelm the system. And you can just imagine what we will do to them to protect ourselves from them, the other. So there's nothing I can think of in the world of science that's going to overcome just the innate human capacity for callousness and just to block out the plight of the other as long as I'm saving myself. To go backwards from there's no Jew or Greek, slave or free, to saying no, there's us and there's them. To go backwards from expanding my neighbor, my concept of my neighbor, to shrinking it, to no, it's just America. And it's just really white America. And it's really just white Christian America. And if I could get away with it, it'd be just white male Christian America. But you need women for something. That's why you have Stormy Daniels and the president. So you can see how people, my point is not to take me literally, but this circle can shrink. Kali Yuga there's no guarantee it's going to get higher and wider. It could go the other way. And there's a lot of forces that make it go the other way. So here's what I suggest we do to reverse those. Stand against those, to actually change those. It's called the philosophy of the face. And I may have mentioned this to you before, I don't remember. But it comes from a mid-20th century philosopher named Emmanuel Levinas. He's a French Jew, and his books are very hard to read, which is my excuse for not reading them. But on his Wikipedia page, it tells you what he tells you. But he's famous for this philosophy of the face. And it's in French, so the actual term in French is le philosophie of the face. I don't know French. I just made that up. It's my equivalent of the charts. Here's the philosophy of the face, and I think this is true, and you have to test this out. But here's the philosophy of the face. Levinas says that if you have the courage to actually look into the face of another human being, I'm going to come to other beings in a minute. But if you have the courage to really look into the face of another human being, you will find yourself confronted, this is my language, but it's close to what he says. You will find yourself confronted by, we might say, God or a holy being or something. You see the face of the other person and you are confronted by this other reality that commands you to do no harm. He actually says commands you to love. And I think this is true. That when you've got a grandbaby coming, right?
Yes, sir.
So, is it your first?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have one grandson, he's 2 years old. Now when he comes over, I'm like, oh my God, no, I can't take it. He exhausts me. But when he was just born, I didn't know it was going to be so exhausting. But you look into his face, then and now, and it's like there's this holy being there. He's got 5 fingers, not 3. They're not long. They're little stubby toddler fingers. He's not an alien. He's just another human being. But he's not just another human being. And I don't mean because he's my grandson. He's something bigger. I'm trying to avoid the word God, because I don't want to get caught up in that until you've read my book. But he's something else wearing the face of a human being. And I can see through that mask and tap this something greater that he is. And you can only love that baby. And it's true of all the babies, right? I mean, you look at the baby on this side of the room, and you can't go, oh no, the baby, you've got to stop that baby. It's not like, oh, the baby. Babies and puppies, So, Levinas says, when I look into the face of another, and babies are just an easy example, but he's talking about adults. When you look into the face of another human being, and you look into the face, see the face deeply, you cannot do any harm. Thank you. Exactly. What she said was, I can do whatever I want now. So Levinas has a contemporary, Martin Buber, also 20th century Jewish philosopher, originally from Germany. Buber sort of expands on this notion. Levinas focuses on people. Buber says it's anything. He gives examples in his book I and Now, not just of looking into the face of another person, but looking into the face of animals. And then he even has this wonderful meditation on looking at, he doesn't use the word face, but looking at a tree. And he says, I can look at the tree and understand everything about the tree from a scientific standpoint. And he goes through all the science of the tree. But without erasing any of that, I can also see something that science doesn't describe. And it's what he calls the thou, the eternal thou. That somehow the tree is a manifesting of life itself, or the universe itself, or he would say God. And that when I see the tree that deeply, I can't cause unnecessary harm to the tree. I just can't knock the tree down. I can't get, I want to put up something else, so I'm just going to cut the trees down. He says, you can't do that. It's not that there's a voice that says, thou shalt not, from the outside. There's just a sense from within that says, no, you cannot do that. You don't want to do that. That's how we navigate the Kali Yuga. Not by taking refuge in pseudoscience. Not by placing our hope in alien life forms that are going to come and save us. But by looking more deeply into the faces of the people and the animals and the nature that we among whom we coexist. My own experience, and I think you could corroborate this, and maybe in the conversation later we can share some things. But my own experience is when I do look deeply, whether it's the little bugs that Matthew Ricard told me to look at, to regard more carefully, or my dog, or my grandson, or my kids, or my wife, or even strangers for that matter, when I look more deeply into someone's face, I do feel this connection that commands me to do no harm, that compels me to do something loving. So this ties in, I'm going to wrap it up because I watched the clock. This ties in to what I consider to be the mission of our species, humans. I love the Bible. Right? I don't believe the Bible is what the Bible claims to be. I don't believe it's true. I don't believe it's a revelation. I believe it's stories and laws and all kinds of things put together by hundreds and hundreds of men, literally men. Well, now there's some theories that's not true, maybe some women. But hundreds and hundreds of people over several thousands of years put this book together. And it contains a lot of stupid things, a lot of wrong things. I don't just mean scientifically wrong, I mean morally wrong things. And it also contains nuggets of incredible wisdom. Yes. So my sense is, different people wrote at different times. Some of the people were awake and are wise and compassionate, and some of the people were just narcissistic, tribalistic idiots. And both got their work into the Bible, and you have to be able to say, this is idiotic and this is a nugget of wisdom. So that's how I look at the Bible, look for those nuggets. And one of the nuggets comes from Genesis, in the second story of Genesis, where the purpose of humanity is laid out. So in the Genesis chapter 1, the creation of people is an afterthought. The universe, the planet's created, everything is blooming, everything is great. And then at the very end, God says in the story, let us create human beings in our image, after our likeness, male and female, blah, blah, blah. But there's no need for us. Everything's doing just fine without us in that story. So what do they do with us? What does God decide? What are we going to... I made them. How cool is that? Now what do I do with them? So God says, let's put them in charge. No one needed to be in charge of the natural world that God created up until God created us. And Jewish tradition says late in the afternoon on the sixth day. We were the last thing that God thought of. We were like an afterthought. So put us in charge. And we took that to mean, we're in control. We have dominion. We can do whatever we want with the world. It's ours. And then you get the whole theology in some forms of Christianity in this country, where we can destroy the world doesn't matter because we're leaving the planet anyway. And Jesus is going to take us to a better place, which we'll probably pollute later, but that's another story. That's Genesis 1. Genesis 2 is a completely different story written by different people at a different time. Genesis 2, nothing is growing. The earth is there, but there's no trees, no shrubs, no life at all. There's just dry, hard, barren soil. And the Bible says two things are missing. One is water, and the other is people. So, first God creates the water. It comes up from the earth. It's underground springs. And it makes everything moist and muddy. And then God takes the mud and shapes Adam, the human, and then breathes life into the human, and then gives the human, us, our mission statement. And it says, you're here to protect and serve the earth, the garden, which is about to come. We're the gardeners, we're the pruners, we're the people who are, our job is to serve the flourishing of the life on this planet, not to control it, not to dominate it, not to exploit it. We are the servants of life. We could say midwives or gardeners, but it literally says to serve and protect, is what the Hebrew says. That's our mission. I think that Levinas and Buber give us keys to how to really do that. We've gone through this long period where we see nature as other. And we still have this thing. I know I'm going over a little bit, but I'm going to do it anyway. We have this thing where just a couple of years ago, remember the Pope was doing one of his little Pope-mobile things, and they held a little boy up to the Pope to get comfort from the Pope. And the little boy's problem was his dog had just died, and he was inconsolable. So the Pope took the boy and he told him, he said, don't worry, your dog is waiting for you in heaven. That made the boy feel so much better. It sent the church into an apoplectic state. Because Catholicism, and not just, but Catholicism says that no animals go to heaven. They don't have souls. Animals don't have souls. And because they don't have souls, they don't live after that. There's no afterlife for them. And because they don't have souls, they don't suffer if you take little bunnies and use eye makeup on them to see if it irritates them or not. Volkswagen just admitted that when they cheated on their testing for the emissions from their cars, the way they did the test was they put chimps inside the car, locked the car up, roll up the windows, put tubes from the exhaust into the car, like if you were going to commit suicide that way in your car, and they would gas the monkeys, and they measured how long it took for the monkeys to die, the chimps to die, and the longer it took for them to die, the less emissions were coming out. And then they lied about that anyway, because they died too soon, so they made it seem like they died later. But they were killing chimps to find out what their emissions were. There has to be another way than killing chimps, but chimps don't count because they have no souls. That mindset that we've gotten from religion continues. So it's not just a thing we've outgrown yet, not at all. But Levinas and Buber are telling us that everything is, in a sense, ensouled. I don't want to take it literally. It's not that you have a soul that goes to heaven. I don't believe that. But everything has this consciousness that you can experience when you look deeply into, him, her, or it. So we're talking about a tree, face. And that opens your heart, commands you, in whatever way you want to understand that, commands you to do no harm, to love, to treat that, to serve and protect that other life. And it's intrinsic, not in religion, not in anything other than your willingness to see the other deeply. That's how we can't avoid the Kali Yuga. The aliens aren't going to save us. I don't think this is a chart out of the Kali Yuga. It doesn't save us. Pseudoscience isn't going to save us. But looking deeply is going to help us navigate so that the damage is minimized. The othering is minimized, if not eliminated. And that we can come out of the Kali Yuga again in a higher and more compassionate golden age. So thank you very much for giving me your time to explore that. And as you can see from this chart, you're better off now than you were when you started.